So one thing I'd love to get your perspective on is recently the Business Roundtable, they came out with this new proclamation, the new purpose of a company.
Right,
and
I saw
these
that.
181 CEOs are saying, hey, Milton Friedman, maybe not so, right, on shareholder.
Yeah.
How do you look at that as you think about Gainsight, leading a great company, and this stretch from moving from shareholder focus to stakeholder focus?
Well, it's interesting because when I saw that, I was so happy because it's so cool to see these CEOs that run these big companies that have so many different challenges, that have huge shareholders, taking a stand on something I think is really important. We've been fortunate at Gainsight that's been something that we've been passionate about from the beginning.
Right.
And I think it comes down to, first I'll say it shows up in the way we wrote our values from day one. So we have these 5 values in the company. And one of them is what we call success for all. And we've had that from 2013. And the idea of success for all is we want a company that we're going to measure our success on not just shareholder value, but value for our customers, for our employees, for their families, because that's a big thing. Think about not just the people in our company, but their families, and then the community around us. And so that idea of success for all is if you had a drinking game and you drank a shot every time somebody said success for all at Gainsight, you'd be drunk by noon. And everyone talks about it. Anytime we do business planning, for example, I'm working on the strategy plan for next year. It's how's this going to drive success for our investors, for sure, but also our customers, our employees, our employees' families, and our community. And so everything we do has always been around that. So when I saw this stakeholder capitalism, I thought this is amazing because people are articulating it at much bigger scales than my 700-person company. So I'm really excited about it. Now, for us, one of the reasons we kind of were passionate about that value and passionate about our culture in general is that for us, it wasn't enough to just have the goal be shareholder value. So I think for some people, stakeholder capitalism is because the world is asking them to do it, which is great. I think they're responding to the world. For us, it was actually responding to ourselves. Honestly, for me, I wasn't the kind of person who was God, my dream is to sell a company for this much money or make the shareholders this much money or even personally make this much money. I'm super privileged to be able to be in a world where those things can happen.
Right.
But that wasn't what got me excited. And some of that comes back to my childhood. I'm also super into science and things like that. So business is great, but it's not I'm not curing cancer. I'm not flying to Mars. I'm not Albert Einstein, figuring out relativity. And so I needed some other purpose. And so our company, we figured out that our purpose is to actually drive this more human approach to business with all of our stakeholders from the beginning. And we call that purpose, we call it human first business.
Right.
And so we came up with this statement that says we want to be living proof that you can win in business while being human first. And so that's something that we've been passionate about for a long time, and I'm so excited to see more and more companies adopting a similar concept.
Love it, because you guys have been pioneers in it. Nick, I know that for you, efficiency is something you love, optimizing each day.
Yes.
Let's take a week of Nick and say, we've got all these stakeholders.
Yeah.
How do you think about how much time should I spend with employee engagement? How much time should I be with the customers? Where should I be with partners, prospects? How do you look at that continuum of stakeholders and optimize to make sure, because I would assume, let me maybe ask this first, are they all equally weighted?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that there's 2 questions in a company. One is, what does the company need to do? And then what's the CEO need to do? And I personally believe that those aren't always the same answer. In fact, I think as a CEO, part of your job is and I'm sure you do the same thing, figure out what the company needs, but then also figure out what are you uniquely good at. And then you want to do the things that are the intersection. The things you're not uniquely good at, maybe you have to do them sometimes. Sometimes I have to do the spreadsheets and expense reports and whatever. But ideally, you have a great team that can complement you. So I'll answer the question for me, but also for the company.
Sure. For
me personally, I think the thing I love and I think I'm good at is things that involve humans, people, right? So that's customers, right? Be either potential or existing customers, and that's spending time with employees and getting to know them as well, right? Those are the 2 things that really give me energy. And so I spend the vast majority of my time, probably 70 or 80% with those 2 buckets of stuff, right? Now, lots of other things have to happen in the company. We need to run KPIs, key performance indicators. We need to have processes. We need to improve our processes. And so I'm passionate basically about my customers, my employees, and our product. And I spend the majority of my time on those 3 things. And then we have a great team that can do all the other things, whether it's the financials or operations or just measuring the metrics and things like that. But for me, if you looked at my typical week, I wrote a blog post about this recently, which is I'm meeting 20 customers a week, average, almost every week, and I have 10 or 15 one-on-ones with different employees, not just my direct reports, but people throughout the company, and I love just being able to go up to people and get to know them and also understand what more we can do to serve them.
I love that. And let's pick up on that blog, because that was provocative. I love that blog. And so for the listeners, Nick was struck by an HBR article that said 5.6% of a CEO's time is with the customers,
Right.
and thought, hey, that seems really low. Let me go do my own analysis. I think it came in for you at about 17%.
That's right. Yeah.
And you have met, based on the math, about 500 plus customers in a year.
Yes.
Intentional?
Totally. I mean, it's probably a little bit of my addiction too. Right. I love it. So, and
Yeah.
it's a snowball. You can imagine the more you meet more customers, and then you know more customers, and they're more open to meeting you, and you want to meet them more.
Right.
And but yeah, it's intentional that I spend a lot of time with customers for sure. In fact, I even color code my calendar, and red means customer and prospect time, and green means employee time, and visually I can see in any week how that's balanced. And I actually, another thing I do, which might be helpful for folks, is to keep the discipline. Every week I send an email to the company about what's happening in the company and also what's happening in my personal life, and I kind of share my schedule for the week, and I list out the customers I'm meeting every week. And so it's practically useful because people know, oh, Nick's meeting this customer, that's great to know. But also it sends a message of, okay, Nick's very customer centric, and hopefully more people are as well.
They role model. You're the role model. They kind of rally to that as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I think we have that as a company.
Absolutely. And Nick, one thing, back to, I was just struck with that last answer where you said, I share some of my personal, which I love. That's pretty rare for a CEO. What gave you the courage to go out there like that and say, maybe I had a real rough week. Maybe I blew out my knee and I'm going to tell everybody about it. Or tell me the calculus in your own head of, I'm going to start putting stuff out there that's not around the metrics or objectives.
It's a very, very good question. Very timely, actually. So I've been on a journey, I'd say, actually, it's probably realistically maybe a 13, 14-year journey. So my first kind of big job was I was running a division of a company called Symantec.
Sure.
And then after that I was a CEO of a company, and then now CEO of Gainsight. And in that process, from running that division to now, I think I've been working on more and more transparency and vulnerability. I think that the catalyst was probably two specific things happened. Number one, at this first kind of Symantec, this company I was at, great company, I was running kind of a team, and I always enjoyed running teams, so I was trying to figure out how I could have the culture of my own team, right? Like, you're in a big company, there's this company culture, but you need to create your own little culture. And so I started this thing, at the time it was actually called the Monday morning quarterback email, because you and I are both football fans. Yeah. And eventually it turned into what I call metaphysical, for a little play on words, musings, metaphysical musings. I started this thing where I send a weekly email to the team about what's happening in work, and what's happening on the personal side. And I literally have done that for 16, 17 years.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, every single week, basically, maybe a couple of vacations here and there, but all. And what happened, the reason this happened is I started it, people started resonating to it, not a lot of leaders did it. I talk about my personal life and my work life. And then actually the second catalyst was I joined a group, it's called YPO, it's a CEO peer group, you might have heard of it. And actually, YPO is about kind of really the personal side of your life and how you can be a more powerful leader by being more authentic to who you are. Started working with a coach and things like that, and really leaned into vulnerability. And so my emails went from, here's what's happening at work, to maybe one picture of the kids, or talking about my lowly Pittsburgh Steelers football team, which isn't doing well now, to then eventually getting to the point where when I go to conferences or I send my email to the team, I'll talk about feeling lonely or sad, or my dad who had cancer, fortunately he's recovered now, or everything. Like, there's very little that I'm not willing to talk about with almost anyone. I feel safe around everyone, and that's been this sort of journey. And what I've realized, and I hope other people see it, is vulnerability is scary. It's scary to be open with people, but the world loves it. Brene Brown, who does the TED Talk, she's came up with this, and the world loves it. And honestly, they respect you more, they trust you more, they're more open with you, and it's been this virtuous cycle. And I'll give you one anecdote where we had a company, every year we get together, kind of bring the company together, kind of sales kickoff, but we bring everyone. And I decided at the end of the kind of all hands, I did the normal, hey, here's the company's goals and here's how we're doing and rah, rah, rah. And then at the end I talked about, actually some of my challenges as a kid, when I was very lonely as a kid, and I was very vulnerable at the end of this. And then it was, people were really moved, but then other people throughout that same event from our company got up and talked about their challenges. And one person got up and she was speaking, I still remember so well, and she's speaking, she talked about how she has a lot of anxiety, and she got anxious on stage. And then everyone was so supportive. Love it. And so it's a virtuous cycle, and it just grows and grows.
Tell me this, because I'm so impressed with your candid nature and the way you lead. middle school, it's lunchtime, Nick's in the computer lab.
Yeah.
And for the time I've known you, you are a capital E in Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, exactly. I'm an E off the charts. Yeah.
So I have to assume you were an E in 8th grade in that computer lab. It must have been I mean, how did you keep your self-esteem and your confidence with somebody that's naturally feeds off of other people and not having that?
It's interesting. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's hard to actually really know what you were like as a kid. Sometimes it feels so far away, especially for me.
It's like a different movie.
Because to kind of fill people in, I was, unfortunately very lonely as a kid, and I just didn't feel like I fit in from kind of kindergarten to 12th grade, basically ate alone every day, and just never had that group of friends and all that stuff that a lot of people have in school. And I think some of that was that, maybe I just hadn't found myself yet, right? And I think maybe I was an introvert back then. Maybe I was an extrovert that was sort of just afraid. I'm not sure what I was. But what I can tell you was that everything I have now is been this sort of evolution over time, just like I talked about with trying vulnerability and seeing how it happens. And actually somebody just LinkedIn messaged me today and said, hey, how do you develop these skills of being able to communicate? I think it's actually achievable for a lot of people. I don't think it's as much about just being a natural extrovert or introvert, because I don't know what I was back then. I know now I'm an extrovert. What I know though is that if you keep putting yourself out there a little bit more, kind of things get better. Now, for me, there was a funny kind of catalyst, which is I think the first thing that really gave me confidence was meeting my, at the time, girlfriend and now wife in high school. And I was like, if she can like me, maybe I'm not that bad. So that's kind of what's powered me through it.
Very cool. I read a book on Leonardo da Vinci, and in the book they had a snapshot, Nick, of his famous notebook where he put all of his ideas. And I took a picture of it on my phone, because in this one page of his notebook, it had geometric shapes, it had the human anatomy, which he was studying, it had some kind of correlation between the human body and tributaries and rivers, so how our veins and blood flow to that, and then it had a picture of just a drawing that he did. And so on that one page, kind of a polymath concept was you had science, you had the body anatomy, you had nature, and you had art. In one page of his thinking, he blended those. And I know you've talked about polymath. So for Nick, it's music, it's science, it's family. How do you bring that composite to be a better leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I've kind of personally always thought about. How do you achieve whatever your dreams are, right? And we all have dreams of some kind, right? And some of us are ambitious, and we're like, how do we be the best or the greatest or whatever, right? And I think one of the things for myself I've kind of figured out is that I can define there's a unique style, and I want to be the best at that style. And this idea of a Venn diagram that you're alluding to is kind of what's got me really energized. And the concept I thought through is, okay, well, look, I am running a SaaS company, and I want to be good at that. I want to be really good. And there's a lot of great SaaS companies, a lot of great leaders of SaaS companies, and a lot I can learn from all those folks, right? How can I be unique in what I do that I'm proud of? Well, I'm also really passionate, as you were just talking about science and philosophy and things like that, right? Which I think it's very interesting. It's a different world that, frankly, a lot of business people don't even necessarily touch after high school, right?
Right.
And I'm very passionate about some really weird things like quantum physics and things like that, but also just generally philosophy and ethics and all that. And I'm also passionate, as you just alluded to, about pop culture and music and stuff like that. And so what's interesting is it gives you some powers, right? So for example, being able to think about company values and culture in a way where let's say philosophy can be helpful, right? Because it's there's actually some underlying principles of ethics of what you want to do, right? Or being able to think about how you connect with your customers by trying to bring creativity to what you do. We have a value at Gainsight called childlike joy, bring the kid in you to work, and that's shown up in lots of fun, weird mashups of rap music and customer success, or pop music, or we did a Disney musical about customer success, and we enjoy that intersection. So I think for me, it's been finding this Venn diagram of where I can find the genius between these different places. And I tell everyone else in our company, you're not going to have the same one. You might be really passionate about numbers and spreadsheets, and you might be passionate about painting, and you might be passionate about, I don't know, dogs, right? Whatever it is.
Right.
And finding that intersection that lets you find your creativity, that for me, that's been powerful.
How do you, when you lead the organization, Nick, and you think about how much of this market right now is volatile, it's uncertain, there is ambiguity to the next phase. It strikes me that failure in its own right isn't catastrophic, but failure to learn from failure is catastrophic.
Totally.
How do you create resiliency at scale or adaptability in people? Because you can't predict.
Yeah. It's a really good question. Frankly, I think I'm still learning as well. But we've talked about this as a team about how like sometimes you can talk to anyone in a team and in any company, big or small, and sometimes people can feel like, gosh, there's too much change, right? There's too many things are changing. And as a human being, sometimes change is actually hard for us, right? It's comfortable to like drive down the same street on the way to work and like eat at the same restaurant and have your table. Those are very comfortable things, very, very human, right? Yeah. But as you probably know, like if you're able to drive different paths on the way to work, you actually train your brain more, right? Your brain that's actually going to be able to be around longer.
Right.
And in the same way, I think there's some companies and some cultures that have gotten to the point where they celebrate change, right? I was actually talking to an executive at Adobe. Adobe, I think both of us agree, is an amazing company.
Yes.
They went from this desktop software company to this amazing SaaS company. And what I asked him, what was the secret? And he's like, well, there are lots of things, but one of them was that all the employees just know things are going to change all the time, and they're ready for it.
Right.
They're ready for change, and so I think there's a question for you and I for our teammates in our companies, how are they ready for change? And then for our customers, how are they ready for change? And if you look at the world of software, I think it gives us the answer. Because in the old world of software development, you and I both worked in that era where you work on things for 2 years, and at the end there's like a project plan and you ship it, but actually it's another 6 months before it comes out, and even then nobody uses it. Yeah. And then now it's this agile model, right, where you kind of like, we're going to change stuff very frequently. And I think that concept of agile business is coming into every other part of business, and people are being more comfortable with change.
Let's talk about change on that point. They often say that discontent is the catalyst for change. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that I think discontent, it puts it in a little bit of a negative light. I mean, it makes sense. It really does. I think that there's discontent, and within that sometimes there's also ambition. Right? Okay. So, maybe discontent with the status quo, but not necessarily that there's something wrong, but there's something that could be better, I think is sometimes part of it.
Where is Nick having discontent right now?
Oh yeah, oh my gosh, that's my team. That's my team. The number of emails they get will be a, I think if you look at all the way to the sort of big picture to the little picture, right? On the big picture side, I think you and I both kind of see these companies transitioning to SaaS and cloud models. And I think that there's an opportunity for all of us to help companies solve kind of customer success, as we talk about it, in a more holistic way.
Yep.
So it's not just like a function,
right?
But it's, you guys are in the deep in this, like going all the way from sales and marketing through the product, through customer success. And so I'd love to drive change at that level in the industry, and we're trying to do that, right? So that's like one level of change, right? Within my company, that requires a change of mindset, right? Because we actually served historically one buyer, the customer success leader, right? That's who Gainsight typically sells to. And now we're having to learn, what does it mean to have multiple products and multiple buyers, and you'll be able to work in like different ecosystems. So there's a change at that level that's where we're trying to drive. It's big change. And then there's a change at the next level, which is, we're a 700-person company. We're no longer a startup. We're not just creating a category anymore. We also have we have an existing category. We've got to be efficient and be, kind of disciplined and all those things. So creating that change in terms of just the rhythm of the company to be more like every grown-up company, right? Being a grown-up, right?
Yeah. So. Tell me, Nick, what is something that is very popular today in leadership and business that you just fundamentally disagree with?
So many things. I'll give you one. There's a statement that's used a lot, which is it's really important to focus on A players. So A players, hire the A players.
Somehow somebody's not an A. That creates some assumption that they're less human.
That's right. There's like an assumption basically that some people in the world are anointed as A players or not, right? Just like we talked about, I wasn't anointed as an extrovert person from birth. It just grew up that way, right? Evolved. And so I think that when management teams say, hey, we want more A players, what they're missing is that the opportunity is actually to see the genius in the person in your team and put them into the right role, right? And you were both sports fans, right? If you've got a quarterback and you're asking him or her to play, a quarterback or offensive lineman, they may not get the best results, right? And so putting the person in the right role
Yes.
and really looking for what they're great at,
Yes.
right? Versus assuming there's some magical person out there. So I think there's this like almost in leaders, I believe there's, that expression, to he or she much is given, much is expected.
Right.
I think there should be much more pressure on leaders to help the teams be great versus pressure from leaders asking for individuals to somehow just be A players, right? Or find the A players. That's one of the biggest things I disagree with.
I love that. It's like a Belichick model,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because
It really, as much as it kills me to say, I'm not a Patriots fan, but Belichick absolutely is the king of this because he is finding, the Patriots coach is finding these players and figuring out how to make them a great team. It's exactly right.
What when you look at the market now, and we briefly touched on customer success is broader than a function.
Right.
How do you see that manifesting out in the next 12 to 18 months? And where are the early adopters in this?
Yeah, totally. So I think there's a few different things that are happening. So one is management team, like in the beginning of any new thing, you can kind of say one group does that, right? So let's go back to like 1999. A lot of companies had an internet division. Right. And there was somebody head of internet. But nowadays, can you imagine a company being like, oh, that's our head of internet, right? E-business, right? In 2007, people might have had a head of mobile, right?
Right.
And nowadays, like those are just part of the water, right?
Yeah.
Customer success started out as there's a customer success team, but what's happening is it's becoming part of the water of how you run a customer journey end to end. And so what needs to happen is, number one, a management team needs to kind of look at, okay, what's that journey like end to end, right? And how do we actually look at not just after the sale, but like in your world, like before the sale, when I'm describing the value somebody could be getting, right? And so to look at that end to end, a lot of companies are hiring consultants, really mapping out that journey, understanding kind of what's that end to end flow. Defining the responsibilities, how every executive team is going to be involved in that, right? Now, you still probably have the customer success leader kind of shepherding that whole process, maybe running the initiatives cross-functionally, but you have like marketing saying, what's my role, sales saying, what's my role, et cetera, right? And then kind of creating across those different teams the right business processes to drive that. So it's not just a platitude, because the danger would be, oh yeah, great, it's everyone's job, but then it's like, well, nothing will happen.
Nobody's job.
Will happen.
Right.
So what we have to find is the balance of, okay, we need a function, we need a leader and all that, but we need this cross-functional approach to CS, and that's what we're trying to champion.
Do you think there's a play to reimagine the CRM?
Yeah, the CRM system, the software.
Yeah, I should be more explicit. So this kind of, if we're not to use a pejorative remark about it, but it really is an inward-facing sales compliance aspect to it, and yet there's so much that Gainsight is doing at the product level, at the revenue optimization level, at the customer success. It almost feels like a next generation CRM.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think that to me it's kind of more like complementary versus next generation, because I think like if you look at the CRM systems, they solve critical problems for companies. Right. And you said it well. They solve this amazing, important internal process, right? You think of the old internal process. We still have, every company has you build a product, you market it, you sell it, and you service it, right? And you absolutely need that. You can't run a company without that, right? There's no doubt. But then what's happened is that's the internal view of the world. And that's the world that exists but is not enough anymore. Right. Now you have this flipped version, we call it the inverted version, where the customer's at the center, and you have that cycle, which is much more about what's the value they're looking for, what's the value you've sold them, have they realized that value, are they going to become an advocate, that cycle. And we think, Gainsight, and actually I think what you do as well, that's part of that new cycle. Okay. And I don't think it replaces the old cycle, but it's just very important in the new world. And now these two have to play together, and obviously
complement.
We have to work well together. But to me, it's a lot of people ask me that question. I don't think we're trying to solve the problems that have been solved in the world of CRM, which are well solved by great companies like Salesforce and others. Right. We're trying to complement those with these new problems that emerge when your customer has so much power.
Wonderful. When a little bit on the sales customer success, if Nick and I went to lunch and we ordered and you got, what would you get?
I get like, I'm the annoying California healthy guy, so like the tofu salad or something like that.
I'll get the Cobb salad.
Okay.
All right. So somebody comes, helps us with our orders, tells us about the specials. We kind of get to a conclusion. We put in our orders. They go into the kitchen. 20 minutes later, you get a hamburger and I get spaghetti.
Yeah.
Now I use that example because I think today in business to business sales and customer success, There's all these outcome promises.
Totally.
Read into that the order taking. And then there's the kitchen, and then there's the delivery aspect.
Yep.
And so what we wouldn't ever tolerate as a possible or a positive customer experience in a restaurant situation gets permeated out in conversations and implementations all day, where customer success is left trying to recreate what did you just offer and promise this customer.
It's the server coming out with the hamburger saying, so tell me more about what you were looking to eat today. Right. It's like, well, I told the server that, yeah.
So why is that? So that outcome handoff is not in place, and we're excited at Ecosystems to work with you to see if there's a more seamless way to do that. But why do you think that it's so pervasive still?
Yeah, I think that there's probably a few different reasons. I think there's probably some organizational reasons. There's some process reasons and there's some systems reasons. So probably three, and you probably see it the same way. So organizationally, I do think that there's probably a cultural mindset of like in some of the maybe more traditional organizations where, hey, sales' job is to get the deal done and we're going to hand it off, right? Now, I think a lot of sales leaders, most of them, actually want to do a great job. Like they actually want the customer to have the right hamburger or whatever. They like it. Right. Frankly, they know they'll buy more, and most sales leaders are really smart. But there's some out there that probably are like, hey, that's our job's done, right? Yeah. So there's some level of kind of cultural, organizational stuff of basically understanding that there needs to be this proper handoff and things like that. That's interesting. I think the real meat is the next two. So process-wise, I think there's a question of how do you design processes that allow the agility and speed you need in sales with the quality and thoughtfulness you need in delivery, right? And that's the way to do this badly is, oh yeah, great, here's salesperson, here's this 300 field form in Salesforce to fill out in every deal. Right. And by the way, a lot of people do this, and then therefore nobody fills a field out, and they're like, oh, how come the sales reps don't fill it out? And they're like, the sales reps don't care, and I'm like, no, they don't. They care a lot. They're just not being set up for success. So there's a process layer. How do we actually make the selling process part of the capture of the value requirements, right? Yes. And I think this kind of ties a lot to what you guys do. And like, how do we make it so that it's not like an administrative form at the end,
right?
But it's actually part of how you're positioning. So to me, the ideal world in the future is customer success and value, like the world we live in, is part of the sales process.
I agree. So CSP for pre-sales.
That's right, exactly. It's not a afterthought that management forces me to fill out to be able to get my commission.
Right.
And then the bottom layer obviously is technology can help automate and all that. Now technology, I think one of the things it can do also is if you think about your restaurant example, if it's like the 3-star Michelin restaurant and the client is the restaurant reviewer from the New York Times, obviously you can do a great job getting the order and you're not going to screw that up. Right. A lot of companies actually do an okay job in the very top clients.
The white glove treatment.
White glove, because the CEO knows the client, CEO, and whatever. We can do that. The question is, how do you actually scale that? How do we get it so that we can actually have the mid-sized client getting that experience where what they ordered is what they got, right? And where you don't have your top sales reps and your top executives on it, and you've created a process and technology that your typical sales rep, your new sales rep, and your new CSM who just joined the company can still do it. That's where I think some of the process and technology can help.
Very powerful. I read recently, and I'd love to get your view on this, that creativity, just finished this book where it said, it's called The Myths of Creativity. And it said that there's an inverse relationship between expertise and creativity. Yeah. So the deeper you and I dive into our passions of customer success and value management, the less lateral we are in creativity. If we postulate that that's true, how do you stop doing things that you know and start working on things that you don't know?
Yeah, you're talking about me personally? Or
Well, it's as a leader or as an organization, because it's probably persistent.
One of our other values, I mentioned one is success for all. Another value to company is called Shoshin, which is a Japanese word that means beginner's mind. Yeah. And so we're really passionate about this exact topic. It's awesome that you brought it up. And I think it's relevant in customer success and in general for any business that you're thinking about. So I'll answer for customer success specifically because it's very timely and it's also relevant in general. I think any new field, customer success having been around maybe 10 years, 5 years, depending how you track it, right? There is expertise there and there's experience, but there's a lot more to be learned in the future than has been learned in the past, right? And I was talking to a leader at a company, actually pretty big company, he's looking for a senior CS leader, customer success leader, And he said, look, I'd love to have somebody with experience in customer success, but what I really want is somebody who can learn and think differently, right? Because I know that there's so much that we have to still figure out.
Yes.
And it's a little bit situational. Each business, it's a little different because they have, it's unique to your business model.
Yeah.
So I think in customer success, this idea of Shoshin, beginner's mind, is absolutely critical. And if people are approaching it and thinking you can learn it all just by following somebody else only, you need that 80% can be standardized, and then the 20% you need to be willing to learn. And then as a leader, because it's a value, we talk about this every day. It's another drinking game if you talk about Shoshin drinking. And what we've figured out is that part of it is if you're in a meeting and you have, let's say, people around the table. Let's say we're talking about marketing. The marketing person's presenting.
Okay.
It should be completely acceptable for our general counsel. Her name's BJ. BJ can ask, hey, why do we do it that way, right? Now, maybe in some cultures that people will be like, why is the legal person asking about marketing? And we think, well, no, that's awesome. If BJ's asking about it, that means we haven't fully explained it away, or maybe we're missing something, right? And so it shows up in the way we have meetings. It shows up when we have new employees. One of the things we really try to do is, when they're new employees, I was in a meeting where we were talking about the strategy of some customer and how to potentially win their business. And there was a sales rep who was in the meeting, and it was his first day. And I said, David, what do you think we should do? And he's like, I don't know. I don't even know where the restroom is. Right?
Right.
But I was like, no, seriously, what do you think? And he shared some input. And like, kind of, you're trying to really put people out there to say, look, just because you're new doesn't mean you can't contribute value. And the final thing I do is I'm very fortunate. I get to meet a lot of CEOs and learn from all of them. And I meet CEOs that run big companies, and it's so much to learn. But I learned so much from the 22-year-old first-time CEO, just as much as I learned from the big, because that first-time CEO doesn't have all the like baggage and dogma that maybe you and I have of, we always do it this way.
Right.
And they're like, well, why don't we just do it this way, right? And a lot of 22-year-old CEOs have come up with some amazing ideas.
Companies have been birthed on that very concept, right? There's that curse of knowledge that keeps you so close. Do you, Nick, we have a session coming up. We have an advisory, Ashwin's part of it, which we're so thankful of. And we're talking about this concept of growth and expansion. And so we have the Chief Customer Officer at Anaplan, who's a member, and the Chief Customer Officer at Veracode, Mike McGinnis, and Christoph Bowden. And they're going to tackle a session on growth. And both of them have had conversations with me. Not to betray any confidences, but trying to get a sense of, does the leader come as the CRO, and we look at that person being more empathetic, consultative, and take a longer view? Does it come from customer success that has that biased, but now may need to have a little bit of a sales orientation? Where does that come from, that convergence?
It's such a great question, and I wish I could tell you the answer. To me, that's like that is the question of the day for the future of this combined industry of sales and CS together.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen is it's going to be, we almost need there's a new title above both of those, right, eventually. Some people might just call it a COO or a president or whatever. But there's somebody that's able to think both short-term and long-term. Because one way to think about customer success is it's long-term sales, right? It's saying, look, I'm going to do things now that are going to drive value for our business in the future by creating value for our customers, right? And so I'm going to actually do things now that drive retention in the future or upsell or whatnot, right? And sales is a really tough job because you're measured on what you're doing today, right? You're doing sales leaders, it's like every quarter is the most important quarter ever. They got to get up in front of the team, give the speech, do the forecast reviews. I have so much respect for sales leaders. And so the thing that is, I think that the mental requirement is, the person that will rise up is the one that can think in both time frames, can think long-term and can think short-term. There's a lot of CS leaders who are amazing at thinking long-term, being strategic, but they've never been under the gun of like a huge number in the quarter. A lot of sales leaders who are amazing at thinking short-term, but haven't had to think about the kind of 4-quarter plan with the customer, right? And I think the person that's going to rise up, and some are going to be able to do that. I'll give you an example. One of our clients, a company you probably know, is PTC Software in Boston. And their CS leader, former CS leader, Matt Cohen, is now the head of all sales and CS, right? And he was obviously very, very well-respected executive, but kind of is able to look across both lenses, right? In some cases, it's going to be the sales leader who gets kind of that top role. I think it's going to be situational based on who that person is and whether they can work in both time frames or not.
In the time frame, let's explore the short-term time frame a little bit. I think that there needs to be a little tough love with sales, in that this ring the bell, the confetti falls, and I walk away. That world's gone.
Yeah, totally.
But I also think that let's get to an answer. I don't want to fill out a lot. Let's be agile. If you're too quick in that phase, and your worst outcome could be you win the deal.
Yeah.
And you get the wrong deal.
Totally.
And you've absorbed all of these costs.
Totally.
And yet you haven't gotten the long runway because it's not a good fit going forward. It almost seems like there needs to be a slow down to speed up concept. Do you agree?
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because I can see it even in my own business as well as in a more macro sense, right? Because we all go through the same things. You probably do too, of customers that are the right fit and they're not the right fit, and how do you think about that? So I think it absolutely is right. I think the sales team, with the incentives they have and the model they have, aren't on their own going to figure it out. So you need this sort of partnership to figure it out. I think that the companies over time figure it out because they're like, remember that time we signed that customer and we all thought it wasn't the right idea, but nobody said anything, and then it blew up, and then we lost all this stuff, and they became a detractor, and we lost another deal because of it. Because you follow the line on these things. The consequences in both ways are huge, right? You follow the lineage. I think a job of a CEO, by the way, or a leader, is being able to see that line, right? Like a lot of times I'll be like, yeah, we got this customer because of this other one, because of this other one, because of this thing that we did right, because of this thing 4 years ago.
Connect the dots.
Right? And so it's very important to be able to connect the dots on that. But yeah, the slow down to speed up, I think, is really core. It won't just happen by like telling people, you need to slow down to speed up. I think you got to really create the right processes and culture that make it possible. What you don't want to do is have salespeople feel like this is a hard place to work or get things done, right? So this is a line that probably both of us walk. I walk it with my sales team. I don't want them to feel like, hey, we can't get things done at Gainsight because there's too many police about, hey, is this a good customer or not? But I think the way to think about that is, how can they understand the big picture of the business? Again, explaining this line, saying, okay, look, I understand you see this snapshot in time, this prospect right now. Let me tell you what's going to happen in the movie going forward. And let me tell you what happened in the backward in the movie, right? And let's help understand that whole thing. I can tell you, like, almost every customer we have now is because of other customers we had before. Right? It's probably the same thing with you,
It is. And I'm going to say something that may seem contrary, but I think it's playing out in our business, which is, everyone talks about taking friction out of sales. Make it effortless. I don't think you can prescribe on what's right ethically for the customer to do unless you have friction. Because that customer may go off and say, I'm going to do A, B, and C. They're going to do this implementation one time in their career. You've done it 100 times across your company. You know it's X, Y, and Z. And so there is this courage moment of putting friction into the system, which seems counterintuitive to a salesperson.
You're so right. And you know Allison Pickens, who's our COO, and she had this phrase that she used, which is so right about CS, customer success people and salespeople need to be prescriptive, and that involves being brave. And so being brave became this thing of like, okay, how do we get people to be brave? And I think it is really challenging. By the way, I've had to do it too. On the phone with the customer and say, look, I know you want to do it this way, but we've done this a lot and you're doing this for the first time, and we will do what you want. We're going to serve you, but our job is to tell you what we've experienced and what our knowledge is. Our job isn't to just do what you want, because honestly, that's not, you're hiring us because of our expertise. And so we need to give you the right directions down the path, right? And so that's something that I think it is a training moment for a sales rep or a CSM. Can they do that? Can they have the confidence? Can they do it in a way that doesn't seem salesy or commercial? It seems like you're actually trying to help them.
This is a question for Nick. What do you think most about?
In general? Well, I guess if you thought about the snapshot,
said, what does Nick think most about?
I mean, probably like a lot of people, the number one thing would be my wife and kids, and and now our new puppy we just got last week.
Snickers, right?
Snickers, yeah. You're paying attention, so that would be number one in the sort of like the theme of stuff. Tied for number two, probably an evening and day. So during the day is obviously customer success, and specifically like. Externally, how can we make all this great stuff you and I are passionate about a reality in the world? And then internally, how can I live up to the culture and values that I've laid out? How can I make sure that that's true, at 2,000 employees, at 5,000, whatever we get to? And then at night, strangely enough, the other part of my Venn diagram, I go to sleep every night reading these like crazy arcane science books. So what I think about at night is things like, does time exist? What's the nature of reality? Are we all in a simulation? These kinds of. I'm actually that guy who thinks about those things.
Are we in a simulation right now?
Most likely, but it's a good one. Well, a couple things are challenging, but generally it's a good one.
Tell me, what is a belief that you've had that you now don't believe?
Oh, I love that.
A strongly held belief.
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah,
actually
yeah.
put a little bit more weight on it.
Yeah.
A strongly held belief that you now have reflected on and you don't believe.
I'll give you one that I actually wrote about. It's funny, sometimes you go back to your old blog posts and say, oh my gosh, I don't believe that anymore. There's a school of thought which I totally bought into because it's very conventional wisdom, and I've kind of come around, which said that the most important thing in building a business is hiring more sales reps continuously. So in software, the general model was you have a spreadsheet, as you and I have probably done, and you put in like number of sales reps and then time quota times the attainment, and they have a ramp period.
And the magic happens.
And then the magic happens. That's it. And so there's a blog post maybe from 6 years ago that said that. Don't ever stop signing your sales reps. And I'm like, well, that really did make sense in this world of like, in the world where the suppliers were in scarcity, right? Like there weren't that many alternatives for things, and so therefore, if you had the database or you had the ERP system, you should just hire a bunch of sales reps and get them to meet all the customers in the different regions, and you will absolutely grow, right? But in the world where the buyer has a lot of the power, having more sales reps is absolutely important, but it's not really the only thing anymore. It ends up being a lot more about obviously your customers being successful, being advocates, the reviews online of your software, all these other things. Now, do you still need to hire sales reps? For sure, you still need them.
Yeah.
But it's not always the causal factor in the model. Just because you hire more sales reps doesn't mean everything else works like magic.
Right, wonderful. Tell me, when you think about the next phase of customer success and sales, paint a picture, give us a little bit of an image of what this will look like 12 to 18 months out, what companies will be doing.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's happening is customer success teams are getting more involved in sales, right? Both expansion sales, like I think you could probably talk about at that summit that you're talking about. So customer success teams are getting involved in expansion sales. Some of them are actually doing the expansions themselves for maybe small expansions, not big ones, but that's
little E, not big E.
10 user out, exactly, literally, perfect. And then they're also getting involved in the big expansions in terms of partnering with sales more tightly. And so a model that I've seen more and more is this kind of pod model. We have the CSM and the salesperson and maybe the sales engineer, maybe even the sales development rep, all in the same accounts. And so they're kind of partnering together. A number of our customers seem to be trying this out as a model to like say, okay, we're gonna be like tightly aligned around this expansion number and we all kind of sink or swim together. And I think that's really interesting as sort of like a structural model. Yeah. So CS being more involved in sales will show up in expansion. Yeah. It'll also show up in new business. So especially in the enterprise, maybe not so much in your SMB, but in enterprise, how is the CS person and the CS model going to be a weapon to win the deal, right?
Yes.
Because the customer now, it's funny, I think every software product now, anybody who's bought SaaS knows, yeah, okay, it's cool, it looks awesome. It's going to be all about whether we can get value or not. Right? It looks great, and it's all about whether we can get value. There's nothing else that really matters. And so if the CS person and the process are part of the pitch, it's like, hey, you should buy from me because I have awesome technology, and here's the features and blah, blah, blah. And we've got this great process that's going to get you from zero to value. And by the way, I'm writing down what goals you have now. You're not going to have to ask the person again. Right. They're actually going into a system and they're going to see, the ROI we promised you. Right? Yeah. You're going to get the next person talks to you is going to have that. And by the way, they're going to be coming back to you and showing, here's the ROI we've driven, not just like one-time ROI return on investment model that says we're going to generate 10 million and you'll never see that again, which is, by the way,
it's gone.
That's been our kind of history to date in the industry.
So true.
Right?
10-year-old Nick, I go into his room. What are the posters on the wall?
It's funny. It just got taken down because my parents are selling the house. But it was all space wallpaper.
Okay.
And then it was a Albert Einstein poster.
Nice. Was that, growing up, was he an idol?
Yeah, it still kind of is. Yeah, he's pretty smart.
Really smart and also quirky and fun.
Oh, it's super fun. If you read the biography.
That iconic vision of him with his tongue out,
just spoofing exactly.
He had the great mix of both.
And he apparently was a ladies' man too. It's pretty funny. It's funny to think about. Funny to think about.
But you know what's interesting? I read a lot about him too. Is he you have this amazing moment. I mean, my gosh, I can't even contemplate his findings, right? But it seems like the back half of his life was the science moved on without him.
Absolutely. Yeah, you know your stuff.
Yeah.
There's this actually really good book called Einstein's Greatest Mistake.
Yeah.
And it's about this idea that Einstein actually pioneered many things, but one of them is special and general relativity, and another one is he actually one of the pioneers of quantum physics.
Right.
But
the quantum
world
community
went there was this big debate about, without boring all the listeners, you can go read it. It's called the EPR paradox. But basically, he came up with this kind of difference of view with the quantum community, and it wasn't actually in hindsight. It wasn't because he was totally wrong. In fact, I think he was more right than wrong. But he wasn't able to kind of connect with them, and there's a lot of sort of interesting human dynamics, almost like politics, inside the scientific community. And because of that, he ended up being really shunned in the latter years of his life.
Right.
So this book I read is very sad. Like towards the end, he was kind of the sort of old relic walking around Princeton University where he was there. And like people were like, that's Einstein, pretty much the most famous scientist in the world, but like not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's very powerful about how do you stay relevant in the world and stay in the community, which I'm sure all of us want to work on.
Yeah, well put. Last question for you. And I think I know the answer because we talked about it, and I'm not going to reference it because I don't want to lead you in a certain way, but the voice of value is the name of it. We always ask. We've had neuroscientists on the show. We've had an FBI lead negotiator. Wow. We've had CEOs like yourself, book authors. And I always love to ask, where and how did you find your unique voice and value? What was that journey? Nick's been on a journey. As you've talked about in the past, you're very experimentative. You've put yourself out there and tested things. When you look back on the arc of your time so far, what is that unique voice and where's that value?
Yeah, in my voice personally, right? Like that personally, yeah. I think that is interesting because it is kind of, what is your purpose in the world? What are you going to add, right? That's definitely something that I think I've been developing over time for sure. There's some of that comes back to that Venn diagram of what is that intersection that I can bring.
That's where I thought
it's a different perspective, right? Like with this Einstein, we can talk about Taylor Swift's new album if you want. We can talk about hip hop. There's a lot of stuff that kind of in that sort of intersection I can bring to it.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe if you read to the very, very center of that, like beyond all the specific topics, it's this willingness to be very comfortable with putting yourself out there and just being very open, right? It's not just vulnerability in terms of like the sadness or anything else. It's just this comfort with being extremely open. And I think when I ask people like, you do the kind of thing of what's unique about Nick or whatever, and people usually say high energy. That's the number one thing. That's probably true, right? But they'll often just say like very open, like just like literally just I'm very comfortable telling you everything. I have nothing tied. I'm not. No, I feel safe and I think that's something I hope a lot of people find is just a feeling of feeling safe.
Yes.
As being themselves in the world.
And was that part of your upbringing?
No, I think it's just like because I think about the childhood thing. It was not. I didn't feel like safe at all. I think it literally was this sort of arc from like I said meeting my wife to over the years trying a little bit, having some good bosses who were maybe themselves being pretty transparent, going to this YPO thing that kind of got me more comfortable with myself. And then just the biggest thing is though, when I would say like if I had one meta lesson in my life, don't focus on things you're not good at. Focus on the things that you're good at and keep getting better at them. So I've gotten really good at this of being very open. And then what happens is you do it and then people say, wow, that's really refreshing or different. And then you do it more because you have a positive cycle, right? And so I just kept doing it over and over again and I'll keep doing it. I'm always finding more ways to do it, so.
Love it, man. What a great session.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Really appreciate it.